Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Last First Date Radio, featuring interviews with experts in dating, relating, and mating in midlife. And now, here's your host, Sandy Weiner.
Well, hello and welcome, everybody. This is Sandy Weiner, and I am the founder of LastFirstDate.com. I am the dating and relationship coach for women over 40 who want to attract and sustain a lasting, loving relationship. We have a wonderful show coming up for you today. I'm going to be speaking with Erwan Davon. He's the founder of Erwan Davon Teachings in San Francisco, and he's going to be talking to us about overcoming fears and stumbling blocks in relationships. It's a really important topic, and we'll be talking about some other things related to relationships as well. And as a dating coach, it is my mission to help women over 40, and some men too, recognize the qualities of a good partner and learn the relationship skills that help make love last. And the unfortunate thing is that most women who come to me for support are great at everything but love. And it's true of most people. I think we have trouble when we're vulnerable, and we often make mistakes in dating that sabotage our dating success. So one of the biggest mistakes that I see over and over again, especially for women who grew up in the 60s, baby boomer women, they've worked hard to have success in the workforce, and they bring that same hard-working competitive edge to their dating life. And unfortunately, this can totally turn off the men that they are interested in. And we have to be careful about saying things like, I'm super busy, I'm talking about your work too much. That's not relational. That's something about your work life. So you've got to be able to separate the two. And once you understand what's not working in your dating life, you'd be surprised at how easily you can turn things around and have dating and relationship success. So what I've done is outline the top 3 mistakes that women and men make in dating in midlife, and I've given exercises to actually turn them around so you can find love now. So if you would like a copy of that free guide, all you have to do is go to lastfirstdate.com, and you can sign up right on my homepage because I want you to go on your last first date. Today's show is sponsored by Audible.com, a leading provider of spoken audio entertainment and information. You can listen to audiobooks whenever and wherever you like. You'll get a free book when you sign up for a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/lastfirstdate. Erwan Davon has taught thousands of singles and couples how to have exceptional romantic relationships over the past 17 years. He is the founder, senior teacher, and president of San Francisco-based Erwan Davon Teachings. He graduated with a degree in psychology, and he soon began teaching personal development for one of the world's largest personal growth organizations. He then branched out on his own to support people in their relationships. And in 1993, he founded Beyond Education, which later became Erwan Davon Teachings. Erwan has a straight-talking style that gets through to anyone, so you can see your blind spots in relationships and then take your romance to new heights. Join us now as we discuss how to overcome fears and stumbling blocks in relationships. Welcome to the show, Erwan.
Thank you, Sandy. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. So let's talk about fears and stumbling blocks. So if you can just share with us some of the most common ones that people have to work through in relationships. Let's start there.
Probably the biggest fear that people have to work through in relationship is a fear of being rejected. Human beings, we love each other. We're very into each other. We really care about each other. We really like being with each other. And when we're kids, we're totally open to that, completely open to that. And in a familial context, not a romantic context, but in a familial context, we're 100% open to that. And our parents do the best they can. And as most people know, our parents don't do everything perfectly, and that goes from a little not perfectly to really badly, somewhere in that spectrum. And everybody listening to the call, we're all somewhere in that spectrum. And there's a feeling that the child gets of being wrong or being rejected or not being received, and it's not an inaccurate feeling. I mean, it's not to say we're not loved as children. We probably are, but maybe not the best way. And human beings grow and develop, and with a kind of a wounded core. And that wounded core develops a harder shell around it. And that harder shell can be in the form of defensiveness. We call that kind of more of a meanie kind of shell. It can be in the form of capitulating, kind of giving in all the time. We call that a softy kind of shell. It can be in the form of avoiding. We call that an avoider. It's kind of like the little people who chase Pac-Man in the Pac-Man game. They have different personalities. And as human beings, we develop these different sort of escape mechanisms, defensive mechanisms, but all to protect that sort of soft core, that wound. And basically the biggest fear people have is the fear of being rejected, that inner self is going to be seen again the way it was when we were children and not be received the way, unfortunately it isn't that well received for a lot of people. So that dynamic that originally is a familial dynamic plays out in romantic relationship.
Yeah, I so agree with you on that. And I think a lot of people totally miss that it starts from a very, very early age, and we tend to choose partners that reflect the wounds that we have from our earliest relationships with our family. So can you speak a little bit about that, how you feel, in terms of the partners that people choose in relation to the wounds they have?
Yeah. It's a great place to focus, Sandy. The partners that people choose tend to either be like one of their parents or the opposite of one of their parents. And people, what we call it, Alicia, my wife, and I, our terminology for it is a person's relationship blueprint. And in that familial context, originally with a person's mother and then later the child-father relationship, certain type of relationship gets formed, and we call that a person's relationship blueprint. It's a self-other blueprint. And people play out that blueprint as they go forward in their romantic lives, in their friendships, really in all their relationships, but especially in their romantic relationships, because romantic relationships or the romantic relationship that a person has or wants to have tends to be the most important relationship, just like the familial or the mother-child or father-child relationship was the most important originally. So people have that kind of wiring, and they're basically looking to resolve those issues. They have this template, and as human beings, we go through life with this template, and we're basically looking to resolve those issues from very early, and we tend to project that template onto a prospective relationship partner or a current relationship partner, and then we tend to interact with that person. Let's make it specific here. Let's say that a little girl's relationship with her father, maybe the father wasn't so available. You talked about baby boomers earlier. It was very common for the father just not to be that available for a lot of different reasons. And so let's just say that dad wasn't that available. For some people, maybe dad was harsh. For some people, maybe dad was engulfing or enmeshing or whatnot. But let's just say that he wasn't available. Well, that's the template, the relationship blueprint that little girl might have. So she wants to resolve that. So she might pursue men who are not available in an attempt to resolve that issue. But unfortunately, it goes on unconsciously. So in this case, the woman would think that, you know, her upset about her prospective partner not being available, she would think it's about the current guy in real time today. But it's not actually about the current guy in real time today. That's just a trigger for a much, much earlier issue. You know, when I used to teach, you know, you mentioned I used to teach for one of the world's largest self-development organizations, one of the things we used to say is that a person is never upset about what they're upset about. And what that means is that the current upset is really a trigger for a much larger issue, and distinguishing that relationship blueprint, which impacts partner selection, is absolutely imperative to, you know, to not being governed by that, by not being controlled by that from the unconscious. Because if something's controlling us from the unconscious and we're reacting to current triggers, we can never really resolve it, because we don't even really know what's going on. We're trying to resolve it with somebody in the present day, and it doesn't really have anything to do with them.
Right. And so people keep dating the same person with a different face, subconsciously, unconsciously, until they become conscious about it. And then they can then heal from that place. So if they have this unavailable father and pursue men who are not available. So is that partially, do you think, due to the fact that a lot of women want to subconsciously fix men? They think that they're going to be the ones who are going to somehow heal, cure, fix, make him into somebody else.
Sure, yeah. I mean, women are trying to do that with men, and men are trying to do that with women, and people are trying to do that with themselves. People, being a human being, we sort of end up on kind of a fix-it plan. And, one of the things is that, it's a really good point you're bringing up, Sandy. One of the things that when somebody's trying to fix something, we can be assured that it's never going to change. Because when we're trying to fix something, we're coming from that there's something wrong. We're coming from that it's possible to fix ourselves or fix the other person. There's we're actually asserting that things are a particular way, that relationship blueprint is in fact true. That although it doesn't make logical sense, we're really kind of asserting. In this case, with the we're talking about a woman and a man, but we could really switch the roles quite easily. Unconsciously, it's that this is Daddy, and I'm going to fix him and get the love I need, and that's not actually happening. That's not actually going on, and there's something very different than fixing, and I like the word that you used. You used the word healing. And healing happens, if we look at the stages of healing, in psychology they talk about the stages of healing. Healing, the first stage is denial. And then eventually we get to acceptance. And that's really where healing begins. The grieving process, it really turns into a healing process once we begin to accept. So instead of fixing, which is really an assertion that something shouldn't be a certain way, or that even that it wasn't that way. That's very common, to actually deny the way that things were in our childhood or even in a current relationship. So healing has everything to do with accepting. This week, Alicia and I, our topic actually the last 2 weeks, last week it was feel and heal, and this week it's feel and heal number 2. So really, healing really starts with feeling and accepting and understanding what's going on, and really being with things the way that they are, and not the way that they're not. And it's amazing the kind of natural, organic healing process that happens the same way, maybe a cut on our hand or something like that, given the right environment, a little sunshine, a little air, maybe a Band-Aid, that kind of thing, will actually heal on its own.
Yeah, so after you do accept and understand what's going on, so you have to have an awareness. I guess you have to have that awareness before you accept it, because otherwise you're still living in this fog that
That's right.
that there's nothing you can do about it, and you have no idea why you just keep having relationship failure. So you understand it, you see it, you notice it, or somebody notices it for you, because that's often what happens, is that you go to a professional who helps you to see it, and then you've identified it. And so then how do you unpeel it? How do you actually heal it? What kinds of steps do you take to make peace with the relationship that you had trouble with in your past and begin to have a new relationship blueprint?
Yeah. Again, it's a great question. The first thing to understand is that it's a really big deal, and people tend to go into self-development or a desire to heal something, or maybe a growth process or something like that, and they tend to underestimate the magnitude of what it takes. And it's when Alicia and I teach, we really try to stress to people. That's why we don't just do a workshop. We have the pleasure course. It's 3 days long. It's awesome. People's lives open. But we teach a relationship curriculum because it takes time. The truth of the matter is it takes years. It's not a quick fix. And so the first thing to understand is that it really is something of large scale. The human mechanism, if you'll forgive the language, is the most complex mechanism, body and mind. We've never encountered anything nearly as complex. It's a system, and it's a life organic system. Very interested in perpetuating its survival. And, whatever formula, relationship blueprint we've come up with, it's really ingrained in our life, in our patterns, in our habits, and so on. And it has a certain momentum to stay the same. So changing that really is a big deal, and it gives people a big leg up on it, a much greater chance of success if they understand, okay, this is really a big deal. So that's the first thing. And then in terms of how to do it, I use a lot of research that, the government has done a lot of research, and different universities like MIT and Harvard and so on have done a lot of research into, how does change happen? Because they do it in, communities and schools, sort of large scale. And they've basically come up with 3 essential ingredients in change and how change happens. The first thing is you do have to have that awareness and that understanding that you mentioned a moment ago. What is my objective here? Okay, I've got this relationship blueprint. This is it. And I want to change it, and, maybe there's even some kind of plan about that or, something like that. So that's kind of like the head part, the cognitive part, the intellectual part, the thoughtful part, like that. Really is important to have a vision, a plan, some awareness about it. The next step is, I would say even more important, except that, really the first step in anything tends to be the most important. But the next step is very, very important, and it's where people tend to drop the ball, and that is the heart has to get into it. Do we really want to change? Are we really willing to do what it takes? Because changing a dynamic, let's say, stick with our example of, say, a woman is pursuing unavailable guys. Well, if she really wants to change that, a lot of the guys that she's rejecting, she's going to, become intimate with or get to be close with or date, and that's going to bring up a lot of feelings, and there's going to be all kinds of feelings from childhood and from the past, and there's a lot to feel. It also takes a lot of time. There's photo albums to look through. There's, you mentioned, seeing a professional. There's professionals to talk to. There's commitment. So it's really like putting oneself into it. Alicia and I, we teach a lot of romantic relationship. It really is our focus, but we do it from a spiritual context, a psychological context, and also a sexual context. And from the spiritual context, one of my favorite gurus of the last century, he said, all that's required to attain enlightenment is an earnest desire, or sincerity. So it's very different to go into this process, this healing process, this self-development process, this relational process, not only having a vision and awareness, but really putting one's heart into it and being at a place where, okay, I'm going to do whatever it takes. Really, whatever it takes, I'm going to do that. Mm-hmm. I know that's what it took for me. I was born, and my mother Renee and my father Daniel, their relationship was falling apart before I was born. My mother came from France to be with my father, and then they went back to France and moved back here when I was 2, and the relationship was completely falling apart. And shortly afterwards, they got divorced, and the situation was so bad, I stayed with I was in New York City and Manhattan. I stayed with the state for a little while because they were really at each other's throat. And then she went back to France. I was 7. It's pretty much the worst thing that can happen to a little boy is his mother leaves. Then at 15, after sort of a rough young childhood, my father had a stroke, left him severely handicapped, extreme difficulty speaking. Extreme difficulty moving. He's still in that state. I just saw him last weekend in New York, actually. And then within that same year, my mother, who I hadn't seen for years, she was in France, she died. So, I ended up having an obsessive-compulsive disorder and just the difficulties were intense. And, put it this way, it went downhill from there,
Wow.
So it was really, really intense. And, that's how I got into psychology and self-development. My point in that is that, there was a time period where I was involved and I took some workshops and I did this and I did that. And, there was some benefit, but I really wasn't ending up in the relationship. I was not having my last first date.
Right.
And, and at a certain point I really had to take a look at what was going on, and it was like a mental process for me. As human beings, we can live in a sort of mental space. It's like a make-believe space, a fantasy space. It's like going to the restaurant and like reading the menu for 2 hours instead of eating. So I really took a look and okay, I got to a point where I was willing to do whatever it took to have what we call an eternal date, soulmate relationship, a relationship that gets better and better intimately, spiritually, and sexually. So, I really got to that point. And, once I was really willing to do whatever it took, boy, the emotions started coming up big time. I was crying unexpectedly. I was, I had maybe 5 or 6 appointments a week with different kinds of support structures and groups and this and that, and everything really intensified. But it got very real. It really got real. In the early days, I was, teaching people how to meet each other and pick each other up and some sex information, and all of it was fun, but I wasn't ending up in the relationship. And when I got real about I'm going to do whatever it takes, within a couple of years, Alicia showed up in my life, and, we've been together now for 12 years in a committed relationship. We've been married for most of that time. And, it still requires a lot. My relationship blueprint from that rough beginning, still comes up, as does hers. But the relationship is very solid because we're in it, and we're doing what it takes, and that sincerity is there. So we had a vision, and then we, really put our hearts into it. And then the third step, back to the research from the U.S. government and from several universities, is that it's not enough to have a vision. It's not enough to have your heart in it or really want to, and in sort of government terms, you'd have to have the community be into it. You'd have to have the community buy into it. The community would have to be a yes to it. So those two aren't enough. The third step is really the structure, the implementation, the walking the walk, and that's the part about I was seeing several professional psychologists and coaches and otherwise, and taking seminars and doing things and trying different things. And, breath work and, running around rooms waving my arms and, talking to therapists and just, really I tried anything and everything, and I sort of filtered it down to what worked. But it's the implementation, like if somebody wants to heal the kind of relational wound that we're talking about, if you look in their calendar, they're nowadays probably on a computer. So if you kind of open up the computer and you look in that person's schedule, you can actually kind of get a good idea, like, is this going to work out or not? Is their schedule supportive of it? Is their social circle, their social life supportive of it? Do they have mentorship and support? And you'd kind of tend to see that in a person's calendar, that kind of thing. So, it's a bit of a long answer, but my experience has been that really is what it takes, and that the insight is a good beginning, but we really have to be willing to do what it takes, and then we really have to implement it and put the time in. Wow. Okay. Well, that was a very thorough answer, and I appreciate you sharing your personal story, because I think it's a powerful one. And I think a lot of people who come from very tough beginnings have a very limiting belief about their present situation and their future, that, you are the way you are because of how you were brought up. And you're living proof that that's not true, and there are tons of other cases where the person who makes the effort to do all these things and really change can have a very, very different future than the one that they were brought up with. That's right, and that really is the beauty of it. It's the journey of a lifetime, and it really is worth it. Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's also very empowering to know that you actually have a lot more control over your life than you might think you do. I think that's what people don't always realize when you say you can change. It's like, oh, well, not me. But and the other thing that I think is really important, because so many people say they want change, and you and I have both worked with people who come for change and then don't stick with the plan. It's really amazing when they get it and they do it and they're in it the way that you described. But a lot of people, it scares them. When change starts to happen, it can get really scary. And you do change up everything. You're changing, like you're talking about your social circle, your circle of support. That changes. When you make change, that changes drastically. And you're going to piss off a lot of people. So you have to be willing to piss people off, and especially if, you talked about the different shells that people have. If you're one of those people pleaser types who do everything for everybody, you've got to really make a choice to be taking care of yourself for a change. That's right. That softy type, that people pleaser type, one of the difficulties in change, I think, that you're pointing to is that, the way things are, it works in a particular way. There are hidden benefits. We call it the prostitution of authentic pain. There's authentic pain in there, but we develop these people-pleasing personalities or aggressive personalities or avoider personalities or depressive personalities. And there are payoffs for having those kind of personalities. There are benefits. If back to our example, if we're avoiding relationship, well, there's a huge payoff for that. There's no risk. There's a huge payoff. Things are familiar. We know what's going to come. And it fears. If it's not scary, it's not change. Kind of like exactly. If it's not scary or exciting, if you're in an amusement park and it's not scary or exciting, you're not on a roller coaster. It is, and we have to be willing to get off those those kind of circular routes, those habits and tendencies that give us something, but they don't give us what we really want. They don't give us that kind of deep, intimate connection, to actually choose that deep, intimate connection, that love, that vulnerability, that that openness to really make contact with another person again and face all the fears that come up for us in the face of that. And it's just worth it. It really absolutely is worth it. And in our hearts, I think we all know that it's worth it. And it does tend to require some hand-holding and some support. Alicia and I teach 3 live groups every week, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and Thursday night, about 20 people per group. And I was sharing this last week, because I went to New York, over the weekend, and I was sharing with them about my trip to New York and how, there I am with my dad, and where he wanted to go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and we're walking through the museum, and he's severely handicapped, so it takes about 45 minutes to get to the place that he wants to go, and which was this place where they play classical music, and they have sort of coffee on this balcony, and it's gorgeous. I've been there with him before, and we took this really long walk, which was very difficult to get there, and it wasn't happening that day. And then we walked all the way down to the other end of the museum to get to the normal cafeteria to get some coffee, and it had just closed. And I asked the guy, if they would make my handicapped father a cup of coffee, and they wouldn't do it. I got on the phone with the manager, the whole 9 yards. But my point is that, it really, the level of sadness that I felt surprised me. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and the impression in my heart, the sadness that I could feel there carrying relative to my father, and with my mother, it's even greater. Even after all these years, it's still there. But if we're willing, if we're open to face those things and really take those risks and be vulnerable and be open in relationship. Of course, here I'm talking about a familial relationship, but it's the same underlying idea. I had a great trip with my dad. And I'm probably only going to see him, somewhere between a few and a dozen times more. He's quite elderly now, and he lives in New York. So it's like, it really is worth it, and it really is a great trip. It really was a great trip, and the same applies in romantic relationship. It's an opportunity to really get to it and really do it and face those impressions in our heart, just like I saw. Wow, there's a lot of sadness here. Okay, yes, sadness, yes, okay, good. And then when we don't harden up around it, because, there's a lot of time in the past where I hardened relative to my father, or I avoided him, or this or that, and boy, it just didn't work, and it absolutely doesn't work in a romantic relationship or finding a partner.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, people are so repelled by that hardening and guardedness and negative energy that people project quite often in dating and relationships, and also just being reactive, like you talked before about the triggers. But it sounds like you have found a place of compassion and love for your father that is another level, which I think that I've been toying with these ideas about parent-child relationships a lot in the past few weeks. My father died unexpectedly about 2 weeks ago, and we had
sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it was. Thank you. Well, it was a complex relationship, as most parent-child relationships are, and I think I've been talking about it a lot to other people because I think people need a voice for that. They need to be able to say, this was hard. This was not a simple relationship, and there was a lot of pain there. It's like not acceptable to say that in many circles, because you're expected to just respect your parents. And not every parent-child relationship is simple. But you really have to come to a place where you have accepted that whatever it is, that they've done the best they could, that that there's some kindness there's something there that you can take away. You've got to work that through. And I really do believe that affects your relationships, your romantic relationships so much. And it took me a long time to not be angry. Somebody said to me, "Oh, are you just working out the anger now?" I said, "No, I worked that out a long time ago." And it's important. It's really important work.
Yeah, because that, you mentioned earlier that hardened shell, it is unattractive. The most attractive part of a human being is a person's presence. Their very presence. And if there's a shell around that presence, a sort of ego shell or a false self or some kind of, hardening or, even hardening in the form of being too soft, which is a different type of hardening or avoiding, a person loses other people aren't as attracted to them. The person is not as attracted to themselves, and I mean attracted in all senses, human, kind of attracted at a sort of soul level, attracted at a romantic level, attracted sexually. If we lose our heart, we lose everything. We lose the center. And if after, childhood, which is difficult for most people, I mean, being a little person in a big world, can be quite intense. It's if we lose our heart in that process and we don't go back and recontact ourselves, well, we fall out of love with ourselves. We can't fall in love with anybody else. People aren't as drawn to us. We're not as drawn to them. A lot of times when I work with people who can't find the right relationship partner, it's not always the case, but more often than not, the case is that they're rejecting everybody. They're actually pushing everybody away, and what's attractive about that? There's nothing attractive about that.
Right, and it all stems from self-worth. You're really pushing yourself away if you're finding fault in everybody.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's and there's it's loving oneself means dealing. There's a way that people incorporate their parents into their mind. The psychological terminology for that is a person's superego. Some in common parlance, we might say the inner critic. Well, the one that the inner critic is the hardest on is oneself. And in this relational transformational journey, right at the beginning, we have to deal with the inner critic, and we have to get that identity, that internalized critic really out of the picture, or else nothing moves.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to take a really quick break, just give one more shout out to our sponsor, Audible.com. We're thrilled that they are sponsoring our show, and they are a leading provider of spoken digital audio entertainment and information. They have over 150,000 titles that you can choose from, and you can listen on any device, including whatever you're listening to Last First Date Radio on right now. So if you sign up at audibletrial.com/lastfirstdate, you'll get one free audiobook and a 1-month trial of the service. And I'm not going to go into all the books on the bestseller list now because we have a shorter show today. We have about 7 minutes left. But you should definitely go there. I just downloaded a book. I can't wait to listen to it. My friend actually wrote it. It's about happiness and how to be happier, which is always a good thing. We're going to go back to Erwan Davon, and we're going to talk about relationships. So you've recognized your own, and you're working on yourself, but this happens, as you said, you and your partner, Alicia, your wife, are both still dealing with some of these fears and stumbling blocks that come from the past. So how do you help each other in relationship? How do you support each other?
The first thing is to understand not only our relationship blueprint internally, we've talked a bit about that on the show so far, Sandy, but to understand the relationship blueprint between each other, understand how we fit together as puzzle pieces. So we know what each other's trip is, if you will. We have we're both have psychology degrees and have both worked in the transformational field, so we really understand each other's thing. So it makes it that when that's playing out, it's much easier to release it because, there's that thing. I'm doing that thing. I'm avoiding, or she's capitulating, or whatever. We just kind of know that, like, that's that thing, and it makes it a lot harder to do when it's really clear, it's really obvious. We know the tendencies. We know, that has to do with my past, that has to do with her past, and then it allows us to support each other. And we talk, of course, but one of the things that we do that to give the folks listening today something concrete, like a practice, one of the things that we do is we do a lot of hands-on healing. And I find that to be extremely effective because it bypasses all of the kind of mentalization that human beings can get into. I mentioned that earlier. So it's very simple practice. We did it this morning, just about an hour ago. One person will sit up by the other person's side. One person's laying down. Let's say Alicia's laying down. I'm sitting up by her side. I put one hand on her heart, one hand on her abdomen. Do some breathing together. Put some New Age music on if we really want to go for it. Put some vanilla incense on, maybe a candle, that kind of thing. And it makes all the difference in the world. It's so simple, just to be with each other in that physical way where we're also connecting the heart center and then also connecting the abdomen, sort of the body center. And it's like a super highway of heart opening and feeling, because the wound that's carried in the soul, or in the soul body, if you will, that wound is addressed very directly. It's healed very directly. It doesn't have to, it's good to understand, but once the understanding is there, you kind of need a hug, or you kind of need to relax and have somebody be with you or breathe with you or something like that. So it's a very simple practice that I'll do with her or she'll do with me. There's all kinds of different variations of it that we teach our clients that involve massage, or maybe even the hands above a person's body, just working with them energetically, or different kinds of talking and mirroring, that kind of thing. But that kind of concrete hands-on practice makes an enormous difference once you have the understanding. See, if you don't have the understanding and you do that kind of thing, you're going to be laying there kind of still pissed off at the person. But if you know that, God, I'm pissed off, but this doesn't really have to do with Alicia, like, would you do some deep touch on me? Okay, yeah, and then it's, you get that nice healing feeling. So some actual practices, Some couples like to go for a walk. Maybe they live near, we're in San Francisco here, so maybe they live near the beach and they go for a walk on the beach, or maybe some deep touch, or maybe some partner massage or something like that. We teach a lot of advanced sexual technique. Our specialty is extending orgasm. We find that's having advanced sex education is crucial to having an eternal date, because the honeymoon period in relationships tends to be in the beginning. After that novelty wears off, if the couple doesn't know how to create chemistry and keep that sex life going to higher and higher heights, the thing tends to flatten out. And that's maybe the number one cause of, outside of the psychological domain, that's maybe the number one cause of relationships separating, because you fall in love, and then after a while, like, you're not in love anymore. What do you do? Well, how do you fall more and more in love? So we find the sexual part to be very, very important. So those are, in the short period of time we have, those are the things I would say is the understanding, and then having some good together healing practices, some hands-on, some time together kind of thing, and then also some sensual and sexual practices to, because it's amazing when the person's sex and love life, that that part, the juicy part, is really rolling. It doesn't wipe out all the other issues. Those do have to be dealt with, but boy, you're way more forgiving of your partner.
It's true, and you do have to keep all of these aspects alive to keep your relationship nurtured and growing and not static, as so many people forget about that part once you find a partner. So these are great. I really like that you shared some concrete examples. I'm all about giving people concrete ways to improve themselves, because it just helps so much. So I know you have to run. You have to be somewhere. So thank you so much for being on the show today and sharing so many great tips and sharing from your heart. And if you could just let our audience know how to find you, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll say a couple of words about that. And Sandy, thank you. You know, I love what you do. You've got I love Last First Date. It's a great sort of principle. You know, you're communicating and serving people well with that, and you have a very nice, real, calm, straightforward demeanor. And I'm from New York, so I appreciate that realness. And then I'll say a little bit, about how to reach us and what we do. Alicia and I, we designed the relationship curriculum to support singles and then also couples in creating and sustaining what we call an eternal date. And it's a romantic relationship that reaches higher and higher peaks of intimacy and sexual pleasure. It's really everything from a soul connection to extended orgasm. The first course in that curriculum is the pleasure course. It's a 3-day seminar, sort of launches the curriculum. It's like our flagship course. And Alicia is offering free 30-minute phone love and sex life goal setting consultations to anyone listening to your show, Sandy, who's interested in taking the pleasure course. And the way to set one of those up with her is you can go to www.pleasurecourse.com, pleasure like the word pleasure, course like a course of study, so, no space, just one word, pleasurecourse.com. And you can contact us from there. There's an email, there's a phone number on the site. I'll give you the phone number right now. It's 415-308-9580. So you can go to the website and get the phone number, the email, or you've got it right there. And Alicia would love to talk to you if you're interested in taking the pleasure course. And just really thank you again, Sandy. This has been super fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Erwan. And I'll be sure to publish this. So it's 415-308-9580?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. All right. So, I might be posting a blog about the show. I usually do like a highlight thing, and then I can just put that little link at the bottom, and I'll send you a copy of that.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
All right, great.
Thanks again,
thank you
Sandy.
so much. Okay, and thank you all for listening in today, and I hope that you all go on your last first date very soon. Have a great day.